There's something that's been sitting in the background of your career for the last year or two. You've probably noticed it, most professionals have, but almost nobody has a name for it. And that absence of a name is part of what makes it so hard to do anything about. It isn't the fear of getting fired. It's something quieter than that, and harder. It's the feeling that the skills you spent 15 or 20 years building are losing value faster than you can keep up. And that somewhere, without a formal announcement, the rules of what makes a professional valuable quietly changed. That feeling has a name now. And by the end of this video, you're gonna have it. Because once a fear has a name, it stops being a verdict. It becomes something you can actually work with. So let's start by naming what you've been carrying. The name is FOBO, Fear of Becoming Obsolete. And before you dismiss it as another acronym, it's worth understanding what FOBO actually is, because it is probably not what you think it is. FOBO is not the fear that you'll be walked out of the building next month. Most people carrying FOBO still have their jobs. Some of them are doing well at their jobs. That's part of what makes it so disorienting. FOBO is the creeping sense that your skills are degrading in real time, that the gap between what you know how to do and what the market is starting to expect is widening in a direction you can't fully see, at a speed you can't fully track. It's the feeling of falling behind while standing still, and it's specifically distinct from ordinary job insecurity because it doesn't live in the question, will I have a job next year? It lives in the question, will I still matter in 5? According to Pew Research, 52% of workers now say they're worried about AI's impact on their future in the workplace. That's not a fringe anxiety. That's the majority of the professional workforce carrying some version of what you've been carrying, often without knowing what to call it. KPMG research shows that 4 in 10 workers now name AI-driven obsolescence as one of their primary fears. That share has nearly doubled in a single year. And here's what the numbers don't fully capture. Skill demands in AI-exposed roles are shifting 66% faster than they were just 1 year ago. Not slower, faster. And accelerating. That's the environment FOBO lives in. Not a prediction, not a projection. The current rate of change, measured and documented. The feeling you've been having is a response to something real. Now let's talk about why this hits some professionals harder than others. Here's the part that almost nobody explains clearly. And it's the part that matters most for understanding why FOBO hits mid-career professionals so specifically hard. You would think that more experience means more protection, that 20 years of expertise would make a person less susceptible to this fear, not more. The opposite is true. And that inversion is not a coincidence. The more real what you built, the more real the threat to it feels. If you spent 2 years in a role, there's not that much to lose. If you spent 20 years building something, a reputation, a set of skills, a professional identity that you and the people around you could rely on, the stakes of disruption are proportionally higher. FOBO is most acute in the people who built the most. That's not weakness, that's accuracy. There's a second mechanism that compounds it. FOBO tends to stay unnamed, and namelessness is its own amplifier. When something has no name, the brain treats it as ambient threat. It can't be located, so it expands. It can't be analyzed, so it attaches to everything. Every AI headline. Every meeting where someone younger seems more comfortable with something you don't recognize. Every performance review where a word gets used that wasn't in the language 2 years ago. Without a name, FOBO doesn't stay still. It migrates into self-doubt, into low-grade shame, into the quiet conclusion that something is specifically wrong with you. Gallup has been tracking this since 2017. For years, the number of workers who feared technological obsolescence stayed between 13 and 17%, barely moving. Then, between 2021 and 2024, it jumped 7 points in a single reading, the steepest single rise in the entire tracking history. And the researchers at JFF found something that makes the context worse. Only about 1 in 3 workers say their employer is providing adequate support for navigating this, a number that's been falling, not rising, which means most professionals dealing with FOBO are dealing with it alone, without a name for it, without structural support, without a clear picture of their actual exposure. That's the mechanism, not personal failure, not resistance to change. A real, documented, structurally unsupported experience that intelligent, competent professionals are navigating in isolation. The ground moved. The feeling is the correct response to that, which brings us to the distinction that changes everything. Here is the thing that matters most in this video. And it's worth slowing down for, because it's easy to hear it and let it slide past. An unnamed fear and a named fear are not the same experience. They're different in kind, not just degree. FOBO unnamed is ambient. It spreads into the background of every professional interaction. It shows up as low-grade dread when you open an AI headline, as something uncomfortable when a colleague mentions a tool you haven't tried, as the thing that keeps you from starting, because starting will confirm whether the fear is warranted, and right now you don't know which answer is worse. FOBO named is different. A name creates edges. Edges mean you can look directly at the thing. You can ask, where specifically does this apply to my work? Where does it apply less than I assumed? What part of what I've built is actually at risk? And what part is the ingredient that the AI tools cannot replicate? Those are workable questions. You cannot ask workable questions about something that has no name. This is not a metaphor. This is how the brain actually processes threat. Psychologists call it affect labeling. The act of naming an emotional state reduces its intensity in the limbic system and activates the prefrontal cortex, which is where problem-solving lives. Naming FOBO is not just vocabulary. It is the neurological precondition for being able to think clearly about it. And what's worth sitting with for a moment, what's worth actually letting land, is that you've probably been carrying this for months without that precondition being met. The professionals who feel FOBO most acutely built the most real things. That's not irony, that's not unfair, it's just what high stakes feel like. And it makes complete sense that it would be the hardest for the people who have the most to reckon with. You are not behind. The ground moved, and you felt it, exactly as much as something that real deserved to be felt. The question that comes after naming FOBO is almost always the same one. Okay, but what is my actual exposure? Not in general. For my specific career, my specific skills, my specific role, that's the right question. And it's not one a YouTube video can answer individually. There's a guided workbook in the description called the Obsolescence Audit. 12 questions, about 10 minutes, and it walks through exactly that. Which parts of your expertise AI amplifies, which parts it genuinely threatens, and how to start building your professional story around the combination. It's there when the name has landed, and you're ready for the specifics. So here's what's true now that FOBO has a name. Naming it is not the destination, it's the door. And what's behind the door is a set of questions you can actually ask, because they're no longer questions about whether something vague and terrible is happening. They're questions about your specific situation, with real answers that you can actually find. The myth that FOBO unnamed sustains is this: that the anxiety is accurate, proportional, and applies equally to everything you do. That your expertise is uniformly at risk. That 20 years of built judgment is all heading in the same direction. That myth does not survive contact with specifics, because when you actually look at what AI does well, it processes, synthesizes, drafts, summarizes, generates at volume, and what it genuinely cannot do, which is apply 20 years of reading a specific room, a specific industry, a specific set of relationships and constraints. The picture is more differentiated than FOBO unnamed ever lets you see. Some of what you do is being automated. That's true. Some of what you do is becoming more valuable because of automation. That's also true. And those two things are not distributed equally across your work. The first move, not a course, not a certification, not a 90-day plan, is a single question you can sit with before the end of this week. What do I do in my job that requires knowing something no one could have handed me on day one? Not a skill, not a credential. The knowledge that came from being in the room, making the call, watching what happened, adjusting. The accumulated judgment that isn't in any manual. That's the inventory that matters. That's where the real picture of your exposure lives. And it is almost always more specific and more differentiated than FOBO unnamed will ever let you believe. FOBO is rational. The data confirms it. The rate of change is real, and the window is not infinite. But FOBO unnamed and FOBO named are different problems, and you just crossed from one to the other. The video named the experience. The obsolescence audit in the description takes the next step: your actual exposure, your actual expertise, your specific picture. It's there when you're ready for specifics. When did you first notice FOBO, not the word, but the feeling? What was the moment you realized something in your career had quietly shifted? So here's what you have now that you didn't have 15 minutes ago. A name, a structure, and the beginning of a different relationship with something that has probably been sitting in the background of your professional life without anywhere to live. FOBO is real. The research confirms it. The rate of change that produces it is documented and ongoing. And the fact that you've been feeling it quietly, persistently, without a word for it, does not mean something is wrong with you. It means you built something real enough that a real disruption registered. That's not a liability. That's a sign of what's worth protecting. The thing worth holding onto from this is not a step or a checklist. It's a distinction. FOBO unnamed is a verdict the brain keeps reissuing about everything. FOBO named is a question, with edges, with a location, with workable answers. You just cross that line. What changes from here is not that the disruption gets smaller. It doesn't. What changes is that you're no longer working in the dark. The skill demands in AI-exposed roles are shifting faster than at any point in recorded professional history. The majority of experienced professionals are carrying some version of what you've been carrying, and most of them are still carrying it unnamed. You're not anymore. And that, specifically that, is what makes everything that comes next different. The ground moved. The feeling you've been carrying is the correct response to that. Not a sign that something is wrong with you, a sign that you've been paying attention. What to do with that attention? That's what comes next. And now that the name has landed, you're ready to start finding out.